Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Charlie Fordham. Welcome to Book In. This is a podcast myself and my brother Rupert do, in which we go through great works of literature and some others. We have been going through some recent winners of the Booker Prize, but we're going to break with our calendar this week to discover who are the greatest traitors in literary history.
Charlie, we should tell everyone why we're doing this. And of course, it's because we're both gripped by the current BBC series Celebrity Traitors. I now make no secret about the fact I actually adore this programme. I think it's brilliant. But I was quite surprised to speak to you the other day. And you said to me,
Shame.
well, I can't do a podcast this evening because Maggie is forcing me, those are your words, to listen to Celebrity Traitors. But it sounds like you're pretty hooked.
It's the third reality TV series I've been dragged into, Roo. Quite a while ago, I watched a whole series of Bake Off, which I enjoyed, but sort of a case of, been there, done that. And I did watch a series of Love Island, which I actually loved with my daughters.
That's very impressive. I haven't done that.
Well, it was really useful teaching my sixth form students back in the day. I would walk in the morning and say, and we'd discuss, Ted and Bryony's latest shenanigans or whoever they were. They weren't called things like Bryony, actually. They were called much more with it names. But anyway, I'm loving Celebrity Traitors. So I've got a name for this. So we're going to go through our list of 10 traitors that we're coming up with. And I've called it the Book In Traitor Evaluation, BITE. Now, there's a clue. There's a clue there as to one of the most eminent traitors, but I'm not going to give it away till we get there.
I can see what you're doing there. Very clever.
Okay. And I think a definition is helpful, Rui, because there's a lot of baddies in literature and indeed in history. But a traitor, I think we can define as a character who pretends to be a faithful and uses this to manipulate the faithfuls into betraying each other.
Well, I've got one, we'll come to them in a minute, who is actually, I think you'd have to say, in theory, is a faithful. But I think they're a traitor. So I'm going to justify that one when we get there.
You can tell me nearer the time. And I think that the definition of, somebody who pretends to be faithful, somebody who's lying, basically, and manipulating, or at least the lying bit, it does exclude some pretty nasty types. So we did a podcast on Wuthering Heights, Rue. And you would think Heathcliff would get into any list of nasties. But the thing about Heathcliff is he's full on honest about his evil. He just is what it says on the tin.
He's true to himself, isn't he?
He's true to himself. So I think we'll come to a couple of other honourable mentions in a moment. But I'm just going to go through some kind of structure of the programme as we reveal our own list of traitors.
Yep.
I guess that puts us in. Does that put us in the Claudia Winkleman role? I'm not sure it does.
Well,
She's really revealed them.
Dream on.
Dream on. Okay. You can be Claudia and I will be Winkleman. How about that? So just some rules. So we're going to reveal the traitors in reverse order. And we're going to go for a sort of me, then you. We'll do a sort of ping pong approach or a pass the parcel approach, alternate shots. We're not going to cover any nasties, as in nasty traitor types, that we've already done in podcasts. So we talked about Heathcliff. Another, I think, couple who would qualify from our Henry James podcast, Wings of the Dove, is Kate Croy and Merton Densher, who were just full on deceiving. And even to the point of, I think if you win the traitors, I've got no idea, Rue, but normally you get quite a lot of money. And that is exactly what they were successful in doing.
Well, Kate, I'd agree. Merton, I think he was a sort of faithful who was dragged along, really, by Kate.
Right. Well, he was like a less good traitor. I mean, he was plotting with Kate in the castle turret with his hood on.
He was a bad traitor,
Yeah, just a bad traitor. I think another thing to say, Rue, it's not necessarily about literary quality. We're not making a judgment on that, but more about just their resonance and impact as traitors. But I guess there's an element. I think when we get to the top of the list, there is an element of that resonance is created by some pretty high impact literature.
The two combine at the end, I think we could say.
The two combine at the end. In general, we've got one per author, and there's a reason for that. We'll come to, I think, with one of your traitors. But there are a couple of authors on our list who, would pretty much dominate the whole list if we let them.
Yes.
And in general, we're sticking to one per sort of genre fiction. So, one representative from detective fiction, one from fantasy, things like that. So not overpopulating from any one sort of type of literature. That sounds really methodical, doesn't it? I think that's more by accident than design. But anyway, and just to make the point that this is a list of 10, Rue, and I'm sure we will do many in the future of our fantastic podcast. And lists in Book in our podcast are not going to be representative in any way, shape or form of anything except what you and I want to put on that list.
Yes.
So they're not going to represent any minority groupings. We're not going to make sure that, there's a token this or a token that on our list.
Exactly.
But it so happens that when we look at villainous people through literary history, there does seem to be a lot of white males on that list. And I suppose, as Me Too, Jeffrey Epstein, everyone's invited, Bill Clinton, the history of Western civilization makes pretty clear white men have actually often behaved like untrustworthy bastards at times. But as it happens, Rue, one of our traitors ticks pretty much every box of gender, sexuality, race, you name it. But we'll get to that one as we do.
Good.
Honourable mentions?
Well, so we should say we had a bit of discussion about this. Who should be on?
We did,
and we compromised, and as a result of that, we excluded someone from arguably, you could argue, the greatest writer ever, Dante.
Yeah, I think we both felt, but prompted by you, I also felt that perhaps, a detailed explication of Canto, something or other, of the Inferno with Count Ugolino in distant Italian medieval history might take a little bit of explaining.
Yeah.
And we also excluded the fantastic Margaret Atwood novel, The Blind Assassin. I think possibly when you started reading about, not only does it have a novel within the novel, but a novel within the novel within the novel. And that was just the beginning of the various stuff that I wanted to talk about.
So anyway, as the great Tony Blackburn used to say, and in at number 10 is...
Where was he last week? Willoughby, a new entry.
A new entry at number 10. There you go.
Yeah, at number 10. So Willoughby, for those not in the know, you're in a minority. That is a Jane Austen nasty man. And as you can tell, if you've listened to a few of our episodes, we're big on Jane Austen in Book In. And after all, it is still her 250th birthday. I think, Rue, we could just as easily have chosen Wickham, though we have covered him in Pride and Prejudice, because they're pretty much interchangeable. And indeed, there are a few other Jane Austen males, Frank Churchill being another, who plays quite a similar role. And taken collectively, I'm not sure how villainous they really are by today's standards, but the way they seduce young women, and particularly in Willoughby's case, he leaves the young teenage girl with a child. It's pretty shitty. And I think, we should say that men shouldn't behave like predatory, treacherous, slimy scumbags. Well, that's our view. I
more
think.
than coming up in this list, but anyway, yeah.
Because there's quite a few of them. So Willoughby seems to reach a position of remorse at the end of Sense and Sensibility, which in a way makes him more human, say, than Wickham. But Wickham is a rubbish traitor. So he ends up with Lydia, who's not a good catch. He has no money. He's not successful. Whereas Willoughby does a lot better. He marries a rich woman of £50,000 and gets to pretty much carry on his kind of semi-aristocratic lifestyle with just a little bit of emotional bruising from Marianne. And he does the kind of slandering of the faithfuls really well. So there's the lovely, but just a teeny bit wooden Colonel Brandon. And Willoughby says, he's the sort of man that everyone speaks well of and no one remembers to talk to.
Yeah, so this is sort of the round table, isn't it? They're all trying to sum each other up.
Yeah. He'd be good at the round table. He'd get all the I hate to say it, but he would get all the young ladies on his side, would Willoughby. And he makes this declaration of love to Marianne, saying, "My heart is and always will be yours." But later he says, "I endeavoured by every means in my power to make myself pleasing to her without any design of returning her affection." You know, what a two-faced dick. And we really feel for Marianne. Interestingly, he's actually very similar to Edward Ferrars, who also falls for a young female and also loses his inheritance as a result. But Edward sticks by her, and that is the difference. And you know, when I Google Willoughby, I actually get Holly Willoughby Rue. So, you know, we can't have him that high on the traitor list because he's not actually as famous as some other traitors. But I have to say that the actor who played Willoughby in Emma Thompson's, you know, probably best ever adaptation, he's called Greg Wise, he actually snuck in there and married Emma Watson.
They must have got married, that's right.
Crikey. I mean, that's a little bit like one of those MI5 spies pretending to be an animal rights activist and marrying the home team. In Jane Austen's world, Rue, the faithfuls always win. And I have to say, before I pass over to you, that at a round table, I think Elizabeth Bennet would be electric.
Yes, she'd be very good, wouldn't she? And actually, Mr. Darcy probably wouldn't be very good because he'd sort of not say very much and then say something rather sort of annoying.
He'd be the Stephen Fry who everyone would look up to and then they'd just get rid of him.
Exactly. Good. Okay, very good. Right, at number 9, this is Edmund from The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. And I'm sure most of our listeners will at some point have read the Narnia books. And you'll remember there were 4 Pevensey children, Peter, Susan, Edmund and Lucy. Very 1950s, very white, middle class. They're all at boarding schools. They're all a bit posh. They all live really by the same sort of code. And if you remember, they're staying in this big house in the country in the school holidays because their parents are away somewhere. And the parents have died. I can't remember.
War, isn't that the war? They're putting a train, sort of Second World War, out to the countryside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway,
parents are definitely alive.
There they are. They're in the big house. They all pile into a wardrobe to avoid some people who are being shown around the house. They find themselves going into Narnia, and there they have all sorts of adventures. But Narnia is, of course, under the spell of the White Witch. She's bad, she's evil, but she's very attractive. That may be a familiar theme as well in future Traitors. And she seduces Edward by offering him Turkish delight. And I remember reading this when I was sort of 5, 6, 7, whatever it was.
What's
I had no idea.
Right.
Well, I didn't really see the trap. I had no idea what it was. It looks absolutely disgusting. Right. Sort of, anyway, Edmund likes it, and he's he in the end he sort of sneaks off from the others. He tells the White Witch everything she needs to know about these children, who may, unknown to Edmund, be fulfilling an ancient prophecy about what may happen to Narnia and to the White Witch by their arrival. And therefore she needs to do various things. She needs to basically try and destroy them, I think, or turn them into stone. And he ends up betraying his brothers and sisters and many of their newfound friends, many of them furry friends in Narnia, including, of course, Mr. Tumnus. Do you remember Mr. Tumnus?
I do remember I love Mr. Tumnus.
The faun.
Yeah.
Anyway, but as you, we were talking about this earlier, Charlie, and you point out that he's a bit of a wimp. He's not a very good traitor because it's all okay in the end.
Yeah.
He repents. I think Aslan is the lion who's a kind of king stroke Christ figure.
Yeah.
And I think he knights Edmund in the end. He suddenly knights Peter. And so Edmund, in the end, he's sort of brought back into the fold. Yeah. The 4 of them become kings and queens in Narnia. And many years pass, and Narnia lives, happily. All the Narnians are happy, and the 4 children become kings and queens. Do they get married? I don't know.
No, they don't. No. Conveniently, they don't leave, wives and kids in Narnia. That wouldn't be.
That's the point. But they seem to live untroubled by those kinds of adult issues. Until one day they're all adults and they're hunting the white stag, and they see the lamppost. Don't worry if none of this means anything to you. It doesn't really matter. By this stage, they started talking in sort of cod Arthurian prose. Yeah. So they say things like, Never since we four were kings and queens in Narnia have we set our hands to any high matter as battles, quests, feats of arms, acts of justice, and the
Love
like,
it.
and then given over.
Oh.
So, the question is, shall they follow the white stag or not? And Susan says, let us go on and take the adventure that shall fall to us. So by this stage, Edmund's kind of full on faithful. And in later books, he reappears in the kind of Peter role as a proper faithful, with other subsidiary characters. One called Eustace in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, who takes on the role of the sort of slightly grumpy potential traitor. So I think he is a traitor, and for a while he's a very serious traitor, but he's not a very good one.
Yeah, and his namesake, Edmund in King Lear, does the same thing, actually. Right at the end, Edmund repents. He kind of he has remorse about what he did, which I don't know why Shakespeare does that, if I'm honest. While we're on the subject, too, of children's literature, Rue, we are betraying our age a bit, I think, with this choice. And I think many would think that Barty Crouch Jr., who pretends he's Mad-Eye Moody for about 4 volumes, isn't it, I think, of Harry Potter, and becomes the defense against the dark arts teacher, is a traitor par excellence. And while we're on that subject, Rue, Snape is a faithful. Who knew?
But Snape, the wonderful Alan Rickman.
Oh,
I mean, just the best.
The best.
Okay. He had to be a faithful Alan Rickman.
I don't know about that. I think he does evil well. But he is very good. As he's obviously a theme here, Rue, because he is Colonel, what's his name, in Sense and Sensibility, who we referenced but 5 minutes previously.
Indeed. Okay.
Number 8. So this is someone called Dr. Shepherd. Now, he is the narrator in Agatha Christie's 3rd Hercule Poirot novel, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. It's the one that made her famous and basically changed her reputation. It was voted by the British Crime Writers Association as the best crime novel ever. And I'm going to break Mousetrap tradition, which is, if you see this play, don't tell anyone who did it, by telling everyone who did it. So if anyone's got an objection, I don't know, fast forward for a little bit and come back to us or something. So it's really the faithful reader who gets manipulated when Dr. Shepherd, who seems such a nice narrator, turns out to be the murderer. He lives in this sort of, typical idyllic, it's sort of Midsummer Murders type stuff, English country village called King's Abbot. He lives with his unmarried sister Caroline, and he recounts how he was called to certify the death of this wealthy widow, Mrs. Ferrers, who's committed suicide. And one thing leads to another, and then Roger Ackroyd is found murdered because someone apparently was trying to blackmail him. So Poirot, from somewhere, is called in to investigate, and he asks, this is clever of Poirot, Dr. Shepherd to accompany him through his investigations. And Poirot, of course, unravels a complex web of intrigue, secret marriage, blackmail, poisoning, death by dagger, parlour maids without alibis, romantic confessions, missing letters, but above all, Rue, muddy, and this is the crucial information, boot prints on the windowsill, which finally incriminate Dr. Shepherd. Alone with Dr. Shepherd, near the end of the novel, Poirot recounts all the evidence and turns to him and says, the murderer is, pause, end of chapter, new chapter begins, Dr. Shepherd. And the reader goes, it's like being winded. I remember reading that when I was about 12 years old and I literally could not believe what I was reading on the page. But, of course, Dr. Shepherd realised that he was going to be uncovered as the blackmailer. He does the murder. He completes this highly elaborate set of cover-up trails. He frames someone else. The details are kind of cleverly concealed within his narrative, but Poirot sees everything. And Poirot then tells Dr. Shepherd he's going to tell the police in the morning and suggests that if he takes his own life subtly, he'll spare his unmarried sister Caroline any shame and pain. So Shepherd completes his account. He writes it all up. That's the novel we're reading. And the final chapter, his apologia, serves as his suicide note. The idea apparently, Rue, came from Lord Louis Mountbatten, would you believe, who wrote a letter to Agatha Christie suggesting it.
Fantastic. Well, her books are, I haven't read one for a while, but they're really easy to read, aren't they? And they are in many ways very dated, but they're very well done.
Yeah.
I assume that what was he called, the actor who played him on ITV, David Suchet.
Yeah,
who's the most wonderful portrayal of Poirot, isn't it? Absolutely superb. And I assume he's done that. I must dig it out and watch it.
He has done that. Actually, there's a long list of quite eminent Poirots who've done that film.
Great. Okay, let's crack on. Number 7, are we up to?
I'm confused. Or 7, surely. Yeah, 7 it is, right. There's some music. Tony Blackman would always play music whilst he was counting down. And did a little recap, recap. No, okay, we'll carry on, Rico.
In at number 7, it's Gollum. It's Gollum. Gollum from the Lord of the Rings. So he is a traitor. He's it's a complicated story. We won't tell the whole story of the Lord of the Rings. But he steals the ring in the first. Well, he finds the ring, but he steals it. He thinks it's his. He then, of course, loses it. He reappears in the book. He stalks Frodo and Sam for miles in their trek towards Mordor. He then is there's the scene at the fountain, or the waterfall, isn't there, and but in the lake, where they find him, they capture him, they treat him pretty cruelly. They put him on a sort of lead, a sort of leash, and he's constantly complaining. So they treat him cruelly. But then he persuades them that he's trustworthy, that he's changed, and he becomes a sort of servant figure. And Frodo says, we need to be magnanimous, we need to show him love, and maybe he'll respond. Whereas Sam Gamgee, Frodo's companion, never trusts him and is always keeping an eye on him. Sam is right to be suspicious, because when they get to the border of Mordor, Gollum does betray them by sending them into this place called Shelob's lair. And Shelob is a giant poisonous spider. It sounds absurd when you sort of tell a story like this.
It does a bit.
It's very good in the book.
You had to be there.
You had to be there, exactly. And they're nearly done for, but they get out by the skin of their teeth. But of course, Gollum's not done yet, and he's following them over the arid plains of Mordor towards Mount Doom, and the whole thing gets to it. Actually, when they're finally climbing up Mount Doom and Gollum's behind them, following them, and they're very near the place they can throw the ring in. And Frodo says, I don't think I can go on. I don't think I can go on. And, Sam, can you help? Sam, can you help? It's one of my favourite lines in all film history. And Sam says, I can't carry it for you, Mr. Frodo, but I can carry you.
He softy.
Picks him up and carries him to the anyway. And then Gollum reappears. He fights Frodo on the edge of the cracks of Doom. He bites the finger off. He's finally got the ring, and then he falls into the crack of Doom. So I think he is a traitor. But I think we feel a lot of sympathy for him, and he's a sort of pathetic figure. He's consumed by the power of the ring. His physical presence and appearance are always made to be repulsive. Some traitors are attractive. Some traitors you feel sympathy for. Tricky issues here, Charlie.
Indeed they are. I've got to say, I think if you look at The Lord of the Rings, Saruman is more of a traitor in that he explicitly pretends to be a faithful.
Yeah.
Whilst manipulating everyone around him to not take out Sauron completely. Yeah. But of course, the great traitor of them all, Rue, is Sauron, who once, we are told, was fair in shape and went to Numenor. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, listeners, then don't worry about it. But he did some pretty bad stuff.
Saruman, at his castle, Isengard, I think he does actually have a round table. I think I think he does. There's a round table, and
in the film he does.
In the film, yes.
Kind of thing with his staff. He does some sort of fancy staff work.
Yeah.
But I think there's the big round table is when Elrond. We're getting way off track here. When Elrond, the Council of Elrond, that's the round table, Rue.
Right. Let's keep going. Come on.
So next one. Where are we at?
We are at 9, 8, 7, 6.
Thank you. 6. Yes, that's right. So the Count of Monte Cristo. Is basically Dantes was himself the victim of Traitors, which is why he ended up in prison. But it's a masterclass in how to learn the trade of traitoring and then apply it with relentless precision to the destruction of each of your enemies, one by one, to the biggest enemy of all, and you nail him in an epic scene. So after his initial betrayal, you get this epic imprisonment when he meets a friend in Chateau d'If, escapes, and through that friend's guidance, the friend doesn't escape with him, he just dies. He finds fabulous hidden treasure. He reappears home 9 years later as this mysterious, fabulously wealthy Count of Monte Cristo, and takes his revenge. And it's funny, there have been many film versions of this, but it's actually a great film still waiting to be made, because I've never seen one that kind of works, but it's such a visual story. And the truth is, a bit like a few of these texts, really, I read them when I was pretty much a child. I read this one, and I didn't read the whole thing, which is incredibly long. I read some sort of abridged version, and there are better, if less, I suppose, today well-known revenger texts, particularly Elizabethan and Jacobean revenge tragedies. But what they all share in the revenge genre is the kind of general idea that the revenger starts with a kind of understandable motive with which we sympathize, but inevitably the more he kills and the more he takes revenge, the more he becomes like the thing he destroys.
Oh, very good. So is this a book people should read, do you think?
I think people should sit around and wait till Sam Mendes makes the film version and watch it.
Yeah, okay. Good. Number 5. We're into the top 5.
Oh, exciting.
George Smiley, from John le Carré's greatest book, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. And of course, I know what everyone's going to say. George Smiley isn't a traitor. He's the head of MI5. He's control. He's the big boss. He's the ultimate faithful. And, in one sense, those things are true. But in this novel, which has a tortuously complicated plot, which I'm not going to try and relate, nothing is what it seems, and everyone is acting on partial and often false information. The spy in the title, the spy who comes in from the cold, is Alec Loomis, who's a MI5 long-serving officer. He wants to retire, but Smiley says to him, you've got to do one more mission and then we'll look after you in your retirement. And what he's got to do is he's got to pretend to defect to East Germany and then go out there. And his job is to confirm the suspicions that people high up in the German Secret Service, which is called the Abteilung, forerunner of the Stasi. The East Germans have suspicions that their head, who's a man called Munt, is actually working for the West, for the British. And Smiley's plan is that Loomis will go out, he'll pretend to defect, he'll confirm that Munt is indeed a British spy, and Munt will get taken down. And various things happen to Loomis. He's demoted, he's then sacked, he's then becomes an alcoholic, he's put in jail. All this is all part of the setup to persuade these Germans that he's A, down and out, he's got nothing left in the UK, and B, he has motives to defect. He then goes out there, he announces he's trying to join the Abteilung. There's a whole long sequence of interviews and interrogations the Germans do with him to try and work out whether or not he's genuine. And in the end, he meets the bloke, the number 2, who has these suspicions about Munt. And the whole thing unravels in a very complicated way. And the twist is that Munt is indeed a British agent, unknown even to Loomis. And Loomis then is trying to get out of East Germany with his girlfriend. And again, it's very complicated how she got there, but she's there as well. She's kind of part of the plot. The two of them get to the Berlin Wall. They're trying to climb over. And Munt's men, even though Munt is supposed to be on his side, shoot them both dead. So it's very melodramatic. It's very confusing. But the net result is that these two agents, Loomis and his girlfriend, have been shot dead by a man who is supposed to be on their side because Smiley was just trying to be too clever by half. And he's so good, le Carré, on the moral ambiguities of all this. Who is a spy? What is their motivation? We talked a bit about this when we did our little series on books we'd read recently, Charlie, and I talked about The Spy and the Traitor and Oleg Gordievsky, who had defected to the West, but was always very compromised and lived quite a sort of unhappy life, I think, in many ways. So Smiley, I think he betrays Loomis, and although he is officially a faithful, I think he's a traitor. And does that make him a bad traitor, or is he the best traitor of all?
Ooh, good question. Good question. I mean, they're every single one of them are traitors and faithfuls at the same time, aren't they? I'm not sure.
What's he say about?
I'm not sure they.
Jonathan Ross.
No, I'm not sure Jonathan Ross would cope very well in the world of John le Carré.
Of moral ambiguity, no.
Of moral ambiguity. Maybe Alan Carr would, though.
Well, he might take him. We're going to come on to those. We're going to come on to those, aren't we?
Okay. I think we are. Okay, so number 4, Roo, Miss Havisham.
Miss Havisham.
From Great Expectations.
Yes.
So we need a woman on the list. And like Shakespeare, and there's a bit of a spoiler there, but not a surprising one, Dickens has, I think, several strong candidates, but Miss Havisham, she's a manipulator, and she does it in plain sight. But she seizes the opportunity of Pip's inheritance. So Pip inherits from Magwitch, as it turns out, the convict. But Miss Havisham, who knows this has happened, makes Pip think that the money has come from her, and so she uses that knowledge to manipulate and destroy him. And the reason she does that is because she was, as we all know, deserted at the altar, and her life's work is to make all men suffer in consequence. And what she does, is she raises Estella, her ward, to basically torture men and be massively hard-hearted towards them and make them suffer. So she manipulates Estella, which is what a traitor would do. And Estella kind of is a faithful at heart. And Pip, who really is an arch faithful, basically she says to Pip as follows: believe this, when she first came, she being Estella, this is Miss Havisham speaking, I meant to save her from misery like my own. At first I meant no more, but as she grew and promised to be very beautiful, I gradually did worse. And with my praises and with my jewels and with my teachings and with this figure of myself always before her, a warning to back and point my lessons, I stole her heart away and put ice in its place. And, you know, it's funny, really, because in film versions, she's portrayed as this very elderly, basically like hag. But Dickens's notes show that she's only in her mid-30s at the start of the novel. And it's indicated that her long seclusion without sunlight is what causes her to be a bit more aged. Truth is, really, the real traitor in the novel is there's this lawyer figure, Jaggers, who's much more sinister and evil. And the real nasty man is Compeyson, who is the one who betrayed Miss Havisham. But as said, let's have a woman on our list, despite what I said about lists. And there's a pretty eminent list of women who've played her in recent times: Jean Simmons, Anne Bancroft, Charlotte Rampling, Gillian Anderson, Helena Bonham Carter, Tuppence Middleton, Olivia Colman. Of those, Helena Bonham Carter is particularly witchy and cackles. She cackles very well. Miss Havisham gets her own Wikipedia entry, which for a literary character, I think puts her in the Premier League. But her traitor rating, Roo, I think ultimately is lessened by the fact that she repents later in the novel when she realises she's broken Pip's heart. And as she dies, she begs Pip for forgiveness. Until you spoke to Estella the other day, until I saw in you a looking glass that showed me what I once felt myself, I did not know what I'd done. What have I done? What have I done? She cries.
Yeah.
I think traitors don't do that, really. They don't show that remorse.
So she's not really a traitor at all.
She's a traitor, but she's just not as good a traitor as she should be.
She's a faithful at heart.
Well, traitors may be that, Roo. Let's be honest. We're all human beings.
I think I've seen quite a few adaptations. I still think the David Lean one is it Gene Simmons who plays her in that?
I don't know who played.
So I'm not sure it's Gene Simmons.
No, Gene Simmons is more recent. She's all of those I listed are in the last since 1980 something. So whoever did the David Lean one was black and white, wasn't it? Would have been
black and white and sort of unforgettable cinematography. Right. Good. Okay. Top 3.
Yeah.
In at number 3, this is the arch traitor of all, and it's Iago from Othello. I am not what I am, he says. That's the sort of thing a traitor's going to say, isn't it?
I think so.
That's what they're all saying up in the castle in Scotland. I am not what I am. There are loads of traitors in Shakespeare, of course. You know, it's a very rich source of traitoring.
Yeah, you know, in the TV traitors, they go and sit in that little room,
yes.
and they talk to the camera and they sort of explain all the stuff they're doing. That's what the soliloquies do, and it's what Richard III does. He does all these horrible things, and he basically sort of talks to the camera and goes, ha ha ha.
Can you imagine? It's the turret, isn't it? They'll go to the turret and they lift their hoods up and then they discuss. Can you imagine Richard III, Claudius, and Brutus? They're the 3 traitors, and they take off their hoods and they start plotting together. That would be quite a good team of traitors.
It would be an interesting team. And Brutus and Cassius, Brutus in particular, wasn't very good. I mean, he was a traitor because he obviously stabbed Julius Caesar in the back. But as soon as he tried to persuade the Romans to follow him, Mark Antony did a much better job.
Yeah, exactly. But there are lots of others as well. There's, you can say Hamlet is possibly a traitor at that point. The Macbeths, of course, both Mr. Macbeth and his wife, Mrs. Macbeth, very, very traitory. And in The Tempest, you could look at The Tempest and say that Prospero is the sort of Claudia Winkleman. He's kind of awkward.
It's a traitor and Claudia Winkleman rolled into one.
And then you look at the faithfuls in Shakespeare, Othello. I mean, he's obviously a faithful, isn't he? He's too obvious. He's never going to win that competition. It's too obvious what's going on. But much of the pain is seeing how successful Iago is, and seeing the noble Othello sours against his beautiful wife, Desdemona. So let's just look a little bit at some of this language. The Moor already changes with my poison. Iago plays upon this vulnerability. He manipulates anyone and everyone at will. With as little web as this will I ensnare as great a fly as Cassio. So why is he so evil? Why is it? I mean, he really, there's no let up with him. I mean, some of these other people were talking about that they reform, they are redeemed. Not with this chap. Why is he so nasty? Is it a class thing? Does he feel chippy? Does he feel put down? Is he racist? At one point he says to one character, an old black ram is tupping your white ewe. But Iago seems, when alone, to be less bothered about the blackness than when he is manipulating others against Othello. There's something he's got about Othello, and it's hard to get to to get to the bottom of it. Really, why does he have this hatred? Why is he so jealous? He says of Othello, he hath a daily beauty in his life that makes me ugly. He drops hints, but he seems to do this in a way that taunts us, the audience. And this is a recurrent question in Shakespeare. Lear also asks, is there any cause in nature that makes these hard hearts? It is not a question that in Shakespeare finds a simple answer. Unlike some of these losers above, Iago never repents, and his last lines are, demand me nothing, what you know, you know. From this time forth, I never will speak word. And that is so much a better exit than standing up and saying, it's all been great. I've loved my time here, but I have to tell you that I am and always will be a traitor.
I agree. That is how a traitor should exit.
That's how a traitor. From this time forth, I never will speak word.
And I think if we look at the current traitors, Drew, on the BBC, I would say Iago's probably a little bit like Cat, or vice versa.
Yes.
Cat has got that sort of secretive, go underneath the radar, whisper things in people's ear, smile, but actually no one suspects until the big reveal, but underneath it, there's villainous stuff going on.
And she's ruthless. She's single-minded. She's Iago. She might win.
So Rue, at number two. Number two, I'm going to say the traitor at number 2 is, if Iago's more like Cat, I'm going to say my traitor here is more like Alan Carr. And it is Dracula. So the Guinness Book of World Records names Dracula as the most portrayed literary character ever. And, you could say in one sense he's not very good at passing himself off as a faithful. He's not that convincing, because straight away you visit his Transylvanian castle and you pretty much know that, you're likely to be killed in the middle of the night. But what he does deserve credit for as a traitor route is his ability to turn the faithfuls into traitors forever. Now, once bitten, they cannot stop.
Yeah.
And like Alan Carr, he's a bit camp. He's fun on the surface, but he is so treacherous underneath. When Bram Stoker wrote the novel Dracula, there'd been quite a sort of tradition of other vampires. There was a contemporary friend of Byron's, Polidori, who wrote The Vampire. Roughly sort of a generation before Stoker, there was a lesbian vampire by Sheridan Le Fanu's Camilla. Anne Radcliffe in the 18th century and Matthew Lewis had written novels of a similar ilk. But Bram Stoker kind of takes it to just a whole new explicit level. And Lucy's transformation into a sexually aggressive predator when she is turned into a vampire who drains vital fluid. It basically taps into all of those kind of Victorian anxieties about female sexual awakening and as a threat to established norms. And that's what the novel I think so well does. It kind of plays on all the worries of its time. So as well as kind of fears of the kind of rampantly sexual female, there's also a lot of kind of racial undertones to the novel, specifically the Count's migration to Victorian England, which, by the way, Rue, is someone arriving on a small boat. He gets to England as an illegal immigrant. But anyway, back in the day, he was seen to be both Jewish and Romany. So between 1891 and 1900, get this, the number of Jews living in England increased sixfold, mainly due to anti-Semitic legislation and pogroms in Eastern Europe. And Dracula's appearance, his wealth, his parasitic bloodlust, his lack of allegiance to one country resemble quite a few cultural depictions of Jews at the time, dating right back to Fagin in Charles Dickens. And then he's also a kind of a Romany. So Harker, one of the characters, describes the Slovaks as barbarians, and there are folk superstitions at the time about Romany people stealing children, and Dracula's ability to transform himself into a wolf clearly relates to kind of beliefs about the Romany being animalistic. And it also taps into fears about disease. So contagious disease, a bit like the pandemic in our times, was a social and medical concern. And vampirism is both something you get infected by, but then have a resultant illness from. And poor moral character was seen by the Victorians as a kind of pathogen or like an addictive activity, and Dracula he represents all of these different things. He's one of those sort of kind of mirrors to nature, if you like. And more than anything, I think homoeroticism, because whilst Dracula contains no overt homosexual acts, it's clear that he penetrates and drains other males. And then there's this character called Van Helsing, who basically is the leader of the faithfuls, who leads a kind of Christian purification, punitively punishing Lucy's promiscuity. He is a traitor hunter. And, I think much of the BBC's series is directly taken from Bram Stoker.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, it's such an interesting book. We'll come back to it, I'm sure, in detail later on. Okay, so who is at number one? Well, he's been at number one for about 1,000 years.
Longer than that, I think, Ray.
Yep, it's Satan. It's the devil himself from Paradise Lost. And I think I might just start talking about him just by reading a little bit of Paradise Lost to get a bit of, before we descend into a slightly sort of camp discussion about his connection with Jonathan Ross. Let's remember how beautiful some of this language is. So when if you remember, he goes to battle with God. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. He loses. He falls down into, it's not hell, is it? Where is it? Is it hell?
Yeah.
It's in hell, okay. So he's in hell, and but he's not going to give up, and he starts to try and rally the troops. So we read this. What though the field be lost, all is not lost. The unconquerable will and study of revenge, immortal hate, and courage never to submit or yield. So he argues his way out of hell. He gets the guardians to open the door, and he makes his epic flight to Earth, because his plan is he knows that God has created this new place called Earth, and he's going to go and basically screw it up to get his own back. And his flight to Earth, which Milton compares to epic heroes such as Odysseus across a stormy universe, is described like this. At last his sail-broad vans he spread for flight, and in the surging smoke uplifted spurns the ground. Thence many a league, as in a cloudy chair, ascending rides audacious. But that seat soon failing meets a vast vacuity. All unawares, fluttering his pennon's vein, plumb down he drops 10,000 fathom deep, and to this hour down had been falling, had not by ill chance the strong rebuff of some tumultuous cloud, instinct with fire and nitre, hurried him as many miles aloft. It is amazing poetry. However, it's also completely bonkers. And what happens while Satan has fallen to hell is that God basically addresses the angels. And Milton describes this scene, and God is sitting in his chair, but of course you can't see him because he's invisible and he's kind of infinite, and he's not really there in physical form. But next to him in another chair, probably a slightly smaller chair, is the sun. And so the two of them are sitting there, and God is addressing the ranks of millions upon millions of angels. And I remember reading this not so long ago, actually, and it reminded me basically of the guy in North Korea, addressing the countless ranks of North Korean soldiers, or even Hitler sort of addressing the Nazis at Nuremberg. It's a kind, and everything God says, they cheer, and you're amazing, and you're fantastic. And every time Satan's mentioned, it's sort of boo, boo, boo. And it's just sort of, any of us who lived in that world, I suspect would want to rebel. So this is the great thing about Satan. This is the great dilemma. Is he a traitor? Is he a villain? Is he the devil incarnate, literally? Or is he a noble figure who is striving in a very human way to assert himself, to right what he sees as a wrong, and to become a faithful? Well, it doesn't work out well for us, because he goes to Earth, and his attempt to right the wrongs involves, of course, persuading Eve to eat the apple, and from that, pretty much everything that's ever gone wrong in the world results. But yet we still like him. As you say in your notes, Charlie, that is class. He is modern. That's class. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven. Do you think there's a correspondence between him and Cromwell?
Well, I think it's a really interesting question. You're talking there about, God is oddly tyrannical and unattractive in Paradise Lost, and the devil is oddly heroic and dynamic. And if you think of Milton's life, he was a very close supporter of the English Civil War and of the parliamentarian side and Cromwell, which lost. So they had the interregnum, and then he wrote Paradise Lost in the period after the fall of the interregnum. So it doesn't take a lot to think that the paradise that's been lost for Milton is the paradise of not having a king, and his hero who brought about that interregnum that Milton served in and loved was Cromwell stroke the devil, because the way the devil's described is very like Oliver Cromwell, one might think.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting.
There's a really interesting quote from William Blakeroo, which is that he was of the devil's party and did not know it. Almost as if when he wrote Paradise Lost, he didn't really realize how much he was sympathizing with Satan. Yes. I think critics tear themselves up and get themselves in a complete twist and argument about this. But that would be the supreme act of literary traitorhood, to be able to manipulate and turn your author to the dark side. Yeah. If Satan had been able to do that.
especially when that author is one of the 2 or 3 greatest writers who've ever lived.
Whoever lived. And this is his masterpiece for
And
sure.
this is his masterpiece. And just to bring it back down to earth with a bump, without any doubt at all, the traitor who most resembles Satan is Jonathan Ross.
There's no doubt. It's very similar. It's weirdly similar.
And I really couldn't stand Jonathan Ross before I started watching him on Celebrity Traitors. Now I think he's absolutely brilliant.
I have exactly the same experience. Didn't like him one bit. Nah, just can't stop talking about him. So yeah, it's just the brazenness of the man. Yeah. Okay.
Good.
So, Rue, we should make the point, I think, that we're recording this actually when there's 3 episodes of The Traitors left. So at this point, all 3 of Jonathan Ross, Cat Burns, and Alan Carr are still there. Will Cat Burns continue to whisper in people's ear like Iago, Rue? Will Jonathan Ross continue to show the chutzpah of the devil? And will Alan Carr just slime his way around, giggling hysterically, a little bit like Count Dracula?
Yeah, well, very good question, and we're going to find out soon. I can't help thinking Jonathan Ross is for the high jump soon. He makes
I do. Maybe, yes, I think it could be his moment.
But I think Cat, you're right, Cat could make it the whole way. Good. Okay, Charlie, that was great fun. Very good. And if any of our listeners have any other
let us know.
Traitors,
much better ideas than Gollum.
Right, than Gollum. Send them in. That's great. Good. Okay, well, we'll be back very soon with our new series where we're going to look at 19th century novels, which we think are great novels, but F.R. Leavis didn't.
Yeah.
And then we'll tie that little bit up. I think we're the special episode, Charlie, don't you think?
I think so, yeah. I think being before that, Rue, we've got one more episode in our recent Booker winners, which you're going to lead us on Lincoln in the Bardo, which I must say I'm really looking forward to. So whether you've read that or whether you haven't, please do join us because Rupert will do an absolutely brilliant exposition of that novel.
Come on, pressure. Excellent. Good. Okay, well, thank you very much, and we'll see you very soon.